This is DJ Hooker, and I'm excited to invite you to my brand new show, Views from the Ground, which will be a great way to stay informed on local Black Lives Matter protests, local politics, and listen to local artists and poets. The show will be every Wednesday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. right here on KFAI.
The viewpoints expressed in this program are the opinions of the people expressing them and are not necessarily those of Fresh Air Incorporated, its staff, or its board of directors.
I'm Al McFarlane. Welcome to Conversations with Al McFarlane. I'm glad to be here and glad to have you along as well. Today is Tuesday, July 5th, 2022. And what we're going to do today is give you a program that aired on our social media channels last Thursday. Thursday, I meet with a group of, I call them companions, to talk about issues, ideas, and events in the community. And what was happening last Thursday was the day after or the day of the most recent hearings at the U.S. House of Representatives, Benny Thompson's hearings on the January 6th insurrection. That was the day of the quote-unquote bombshell testimony by the former aide to the White House, the Trump chief of staff. We discussed that. We also discussed that moments before this program on last Thursday, Ketanji Brown Jackson was being sworn in as the newest member of the Supreme Court of the United States. So stand by. I'm going to play that now. If you're watching on any of the social media channels, Facebook or YouTube, you can weigh in on this review of this previously broadcast program in our chats. If you're listening here on the studio, enjoy. We thank you for being part of our community and for letting us to bring conversations with Al McFarlane to you on a regular basis. So now I'm going to cue up and play the piece from last Thursday, a discussion about the Supreme Court and about the hearings of the January 6th insurrection.
I was saying that I watched the swearing in and was struck by a variety of emotions. First, overwhelming gratification that Justice Jackson has been appointed. I think that she is more than qualified, and indeed, I think that she comes on the court at a time when she is more deserving to be on the court than the court is deserving to have someone of her esteem. But this is a great moment for the country, the first Black woman on the Supreme Court. I hope she won't be the last. But there were also some other people involved in that swearing in. Justice Roberts gave the first oath, and Justice Stephen Breyer gave the second oath. But with respect to each of them, I was struck by the fact, first of all, that Ketanji Brown Jackson is she was a clerk of Breyer. And so there was another symbolic kind of passing of the charge taking place. I think that Stephen Breyer has been an excellent member of the court, but on a court that has been shifting radically towards the right, I think that his talents were, in the last few years, wasted. The third person who was involved was the center of my third kind of set of emotions, and that was Chief Justice Roberts. I think Chief Justice Roberts is now the most marginalized, insignificant Chief Justice that we've had probably in the last 100 years or so. His positions on the court now or without real meaning either to the liberals or to the radical conservatives on the court. I hate to call them conservatives. That's what they call themselves. But I simply think that the court has been captured by a group of radicals, and that was the 50-year plan. They succeeded at it, and now the question for the country is, what are we going to about it?
What do you mean by marginalized more? Go deeper into that if you would.
Right now there is a solid block for anything that the radical right wants to do. Justice Thomas, Justice Alito, Justice Gorsuch, Justice Bryant, and Justice Kavanaugh. So those five individuals constitute the majority of the court, and they no longer need Justice Roberts, as a vote in order to have the majority opinion on the court. And so that leaves Roberts kind of sitting there pleading with the majority side that they moderate themselves, that they go slow, that they consider his opinion. And as the overturning of Roe v. Wade suggests, they're not listening to him. And it's not only that they are not listening to him with respect to issues of privacy, but they're not listening to him in other respects too. He is providing a sixth vote, which is unnecessary for the radical right. They know it, and they are acting like it.
Where do you see the logical movement or path for this new ultra-conservative majority? What can we expect? Unfettered, unchallenged, unchallengeable, except by restructuring the court. How far can they go? How far will they go?
Well, an activist court can do a lot of damage. Today, the court, and I apologize for not having the name of the opinion, but today the court came down with an environmental law opinion in which they concluded that essentially the Congress has been delegating too broadly to agencies. And that, for instance, in the environmental area, that the court could not look at some very technical, complex, technological, scientific issues and say, we will set the parameters and then we will allow the agency to handle the details. That has been the approach that the court has taken, certainly for the last 50 or so years. And today, the court, on its last day and on Breyer's last day, Breyer was an administrative law expert, by the way, before joining the court. They gave Justice Breyer a going away precedent, and that precedent essentially said, we, the court, are now going to take responsibility for deciding which issues the agency ought to be able to be delegated the responsibility of handling the details for. We will decide, not the Congress, whether the matter is a matter that should be ground out in the Congress, or whether it can be passed on to an agency so that the agency can apply their technical expertise to it. That's a radical shift. And what it means is that when it comes to the big issues, the really tough issues, such as, for instance, how much carbon we should have in the in our atmosphere, how much should be released by companies. The court is now saying that Congress has to set those kinds of details. And if there's a need for some change because, there's been a new scientific breakthrough, there's been better data available, then the Congress has to go back and rewrite the law. It can't simply say to the agency, you have expertise in this area, we don't, and what we are delegating to you as an agency is the responsibility for staying within these guidelines. The court says, no, we'll decide whether and how wide and how detailed those guidelines have to be. And if it doesn't satisfy our sensibility, we are going to strap the law down and force Congress to have to
legislate,
negotiate about it. The problem is, though, that some of these issues are so economically and politically charged that Congress knows that it cannot regulate them on a day-to-day basis. That's why it set up the agencies in the first place. So it wouldn't have to try to regulate on a day-to-day basis.
as you see this court developing its legs led by this ultra-conservative majority, what's going to be the impact on things that we kind of have held and taken for granted? The progress in voting rights, for example, in human rights, the progress in, let's talk about Roe v. Wade, what that means as a standard or a signpost of where the court will go. The things that we have become accustomed to. I heard, I think, Vice President Harris say for the first time the court is taking away people's rights. That's a new experience. So what do you think?
Well, I think the first thing that we have to understand about Dobbs v. Jackson is that it did not simply end the right, a woman's right to have an abortion. What it did was that it removed women from the protection of the constitutional right to privacy. Look at it this way. Let's suppose that a man has an exam with their doctor, and the doctor says, well, you've got prostate cancer, and you're going to have to have surgery. Could you ever imagine that we would put to a vote in every state the issue of whether a man could have surgery on their prostate on the grounds that, well, that has to do with reproduction and the potentiality for child? We would never do something like that. But yet the court has said that with respect to women, that when they consult their doctors, and they and their doctors decide what the course of treatment ought to be for their health and that health broadly. No, you don't have that right. Today, as a result of Dobbs v. Jackson, women are less equal and therefore less free in this country than they were before the court handed down its decision. And worse yet, while the court tried to temporize and caution, we are not trying to take privacy rights away. We are simply saying that unless the right is firmly implanted in the history of the country, then it can't be held as a privacy right. Well, think about what that means. What that means is that all of the rights that have been recently, meaning in the last 50 years, are articulated as protected by the right of privacy are now in jeopardy. That would include the right to birth control. It includes the right to marry who you want. It also includes miscegenation law. And the court said, oh, no, we're not going to extend this decision to those areas. This decision only stands for how we deal with the question of an abortion, which involves human life. Well, that makes no sense at all. And as the minority said in defense, that you may say that the doctrine that you're handing down today doesn't go beyond abortion. But that doesn't mean that the theory behind the decision that you hand down today won't be applied in other areas. And of course, in particular, I think it was Gorsuch and Kavanaugh both said, well, no, we're not going to take this that forward. But guess what? Justice Clarence Thomas was clear in the way that he has been clear for the last 24, 25 years. He has been without restraint in terms of laying down a black letter law principle and saying that this black letter law principle should be applied across the board in all areas. And despite the majority assertion won't go there, I would ask, how can we believe that the majority won't go there when in fact we've already seen that at least 3 of the justices, meaning Kavanaugh and Bryant and Gorsuch, all said that Roe was settled doctrine and that they wouldn't go there.
Yeah.
If they are misrepresented about that, however way you want to see it, how could you trust them?
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane. Fascinating presentation. The speaker, I think I did not properly introduce him at the beginning of the playing of this tape. This is a broadcast of one of the Conversations with Al McFarlane shows that was done on last Thursday. That was Professor Dean Burnell Venable Powell, Dean Emeritus for University of South Carolina Law School, also former Dean of the Law School at the University of Missouri at Kansas City. The program included my regular crew for Thursdays, my writing partner, Brenda Lyle Gray, also Yusuf Mjini from St. Paul, a noted scholar, activist, organizer, master communicator, former head of the Minneapolis Urban Coalition. The program included Angela Rose Myers, former head of the Minneapolis NAACP. She's currently a graduate student at the University of Minnesota. And the program included Dr. Irma McLaurin. Dr. McLaurin is an editor, culture and education editor for Inside News. She's the former president of Shaw University in North Carolina and heads the Irma McLaurin Black Feminist Archive at the University of Massachusetts, Amherst. So we continue now with this discussion. This discussion took place last Thursday for Conversations with Al McFarlane. We're sharing it with you, our broadcast audience here on KFAI. Next up, I believe, is Yusuf Mjini.
On an issue such as this, more than that, why should we trust?
Yusuf, jump in.
3 of the 4 perjured themselves on that very issue as part of the appointment process. So you're absolutely correct.
Well, as Richard Nixon said during Watergate, perjury is a hard rap to prove. I don't think we can, as a matter of law, say that they perjured themselves, but we can certainly say, as the 2 senators, the one from Maine and
Susan.
Susan Collins, and,
Yeah.
and what's the woman from Alaska? They both said, "Oh, well, we were misled. That wasn't the understanding we were left with." So you're absolutely right there.
Yusuf, what's on your mind, man, when you think about the court, the swearing in of Ketanji, Chief Justice Ketanji Brown Jackson today?
Well, unfortunately, it still remains a 6-3 court. And the proposals to increase the size of the court range from adding 4 justices, which would make it a total of 13, to a more representative court with 20 additional justices, taking it as high as 29, which would require a 15-14 majority decision. And I think the primary question is how representative of the American public and American opinion is the Supreme Court? Because upwards of 70% of the people in this country are opposed to the overturning of Roe v. Wade, but we had, a handful of justices decide that it ought to be otherwise, and they acted accordingly. So how representative is it? How representative should it be? Is a significant question, not just now, but for the future. And Burnell, you're correct that Clarence Thomas not only cited everything except Loving v. Virginia in terms of, the black letter law to overturn other rights that currently exist or are precedents before the Supreme Court. And some people found it interesting that he mentioned everything except interracial marriage, which a number of the issues that he raised were also based on that Loving v. Virginia precedent. So, I feel for Justice Jackson to the degree that she's in a house full of strangers and has to vote from a minority position, at least in terms of how the court is stacked up numerically. And the Republicans, if they get 34 state houses in the midterm elections, are prepared to try and call a constitutional convention to take the country even further to the right than it now seems to be. So it will be interesting to see if they have, the 34 states required to call a constitutional convention, and if 38 of the states would vote for any proposed changes that might, be forwarded from that convention. So right now it's a waiting game. We'll have to wait and see. But the interim definitely is shaping up to be a rocky period full of turmoil from the court. And we'll see what, only 1% of the cases that come through the federal appeals court wind up on the Supreme Court docket. And which ones are going to be forthcoming, as Burnell mentioned, is really the $64,000 question. Because what direction the court is leaning is clearly not a case that requires much speculation.
Brenda, as you watched today, what were your thoughts did you watch the swearing in? I think you're muted. There you go. Did you watch the swearing in, Brenda?
I did, and it is historical, and I'm very, very proud of her. But we need to pray for her. We really, really do. She's facing immigration, affirmative action, voting. I mean, she's got all of these issues. And like you said, she's walking in as a minority, and she's going to be scrutinized. They're going to keep an eye on her. And as far as people, I've been getting emails that I have, haven't heard from some of these people, and they wanted me to ask Burnell about number one, Merrick Garland, the position that he is in as far as the hearings and the information that has come out, that he is in a very difficult position because of the climate of the country. If Trump is convicted, then you've got his followers that have been threatening another uprising. And they said that the Adam Kissinger or whatever, that this was the beginning. You've got people afraid of what's going to happen. You've got credibility as far as the court, because it's losing, chipping off their credibility day by day with decisions and with what is coming out. But one thing that we really have to look at is Trump has a following that is adamant in the fact that they're going to go right, and even over the cliff. So I don't know where the Department of Justice hits. Another one of my students asked about Biden and what it meant by codify or codified, and the position that he's in as far as Roe versus Wade. Could he do that with an executive order? So that was another question. So, people are, number one, they're watching this show, a lot of people who want to get trusted information. So kudos on that, Al, because they really do appreciate it. So I don't know. I'm just stuck. It's just sad to me. And the witness tampering. Could that be? That was another question. Could that be proven if they were able to trace the phone calls? So I think, it's just a multiplicity of concern, anger, because when you think of those people with guns getting to Capitol, they meant to have bloodshed. And there's no question. So, I don't know.
Brunel, maybe you'll respond to some of the things raised. The chat here says a person who's identified himself or herself as risky opinions says the January 6th hearing is just a Democratic political theater, or it's just Democratic political theater, and that the majority of Americans don't care. So that's one comment that someone has made. You can respond to that as well.
Well, I'm laughing before I even have a chance to verbalize. And the reason I'm laughing is that the hope of the Republican Party and the hope of Fox News was that there would be a hearing that nobody would watch, and that would kill this matter. But the fact of the matter is that millions of Americans are viewing the hearings in real time, and millions more are viewing the replays of the hearings and the commentaries about the hearings. And as someone recently commented, it's almost as though we are watching a television series drama. And we can't get enough because we are waiting what's going to happen in the next episode. So let's talk about what kind of pressure this puts on Merrick Garland, which was one of the questions of Brenda's student board.
Absolutely.
I think that the short answer is the pressure that it puts on the Justice Department is almost too strong to be measured. Think about it this way. we want a Justice Department that is beyond politics, that is beyond being used as a tool by the president or whoever the incumbent administration is, or whoever the dominant party is in the Congress. We want the Justice Department to be able to act independently. And thus far, the Justice Department has tried to stay out of the public discussion, to keep its head down and to move forward. The one break we got in that was a couple of weeks ago. Attorney General Garland said that yes, he would be watching the hearing, and the attorneys in his office, U.S. attorneys around the country, they would be watching the hearing. That they knew that they were important, and that he had instructed his people to weigh the law and to go wherever the law takes them, no matter how high, was the case. I think that that's what we want to hear from an attorney general, and I understand that from the standpoint of the public, people would like to hear the Justice Department Attorney General say, yes, we're going to go after this guy. He's gotten away with so much in his time to stop. I don't think that would be a proper way for the Justice Department to act. I think that it's the responsibility of the journalists and the commentators to raise the question, what are they going to do? It's the responsibility of the Justice Department to respond, you will see in due and adequate time. We are working on the case. And that's what they've been doing. Now, on the question of, well, what about the terrible situation that may arise if Trump is indicted, and what will that do to the stability in the country, and what about all the threats?
Yeah.
On that question, I would start by saying that no nation that is worthy of being called a nation should ever allow itself to be threatened by the use of force by anybody at any time under any circumstance. And that means that in this situation, the Justice Department has a duty. They ought to carry out that duty. Their duty is to enforce the law. And if that means that Trump and his acolytes, I'm trying to find a neutral term for it. If that means that Trump and those around him who have assisted him are in a situation where probable cause exists to believe that they have committed a crime, and the Justice Department believes that they not only have committed a crime, but, and here's the second standard for the Justice Department, that they have a case that they can win. If those two criteria are met, the Justice Department ought to move against Donald Trump and anybody associated with him, and they ought to find themselves in a court of law forced to defend themselves. They ought to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, and I put no qualifications on that.
Brunel, that's come up several times, and they're saying, how can you prosecute the Proud Boys, the Oak Ridge Boys, all of these people that are going to do jail time, but you won't, right now step up to the one person who created it all? And I think the big shock was that they did have guns. They did have weapons. They went up there to kill.
Well,
that's been the big conversation, on CNN early in the morning. How can you not do something to him when these people that followed his instructions are going to jail? Some of them.
Yes, but remember, we don't prosecute what we know. We prosecute what we can prove in a court of law.
No, that's true.
And there's been a lot of talk recently. In fact, it started about the time that Cohen, who was the president's lawyer and fixer, when he said Donald Trump speaks in code. Everybody understands what the code is. And we've gotten to the point now where we simply say, well, the White House was being run like a mafia organization. And everybody knows how the Don slipped, and that's the way in which Donald Trump was operating out of the White House. What that means is that Donald Trump has taken made every effort to make sure that the people around him, quote unquote, aren't going to rat him out. He's made every effort to have people around him who are willing to threaten other people to the extent that they may be willing to talk to justice. And we also know that Donald Trump made efforts to make sure that some evidence was, quite frankly, destroyed. And we have stories of them tearing up documents and flushing them down the toilet and doing that sort of thing. So Merrick Garland doesn't have an easy job here. He can know that Donald Trump is a mafia don, but that doesn't mean that he knows that he can prove guilt beyond a reasonable doubt in a court of law. One last thing. Remember, we didn't send Al Capone to jail for all the murders that he was implicated in. He went to jail on tax fraud. We got him on what we could get him on.
And that's, yes, and again, direct response to Risky Opinions, who said the January 6th hearing is a Democrats' political theater. Well, it is actually the duty of the Senate, right? It is a duty of our Congress, even if it is something of an investigation. Maybe it is not what, is prosecutor would bring forward. This is on the record. As American people, we have and we deserve and we have the right to know what went on January 6th. And it is their duty to uncover the full extent of collusion, conspiracy, and work that the Trump administration went through to instigate and initiate the January 6th insurrection.
I'm Al McFarlane. This is Conversations with Al McFarlane, replaying an interview, a great program we presented over our social media channels last Thursday. And we're discussing SCOTUS and the January 6th insurrection. Now you're hearing the voice of Angela Rose Myers. She's a community activist, a researcher, former president of the Minneapolis NAACP, a graduate student at the University of Minnesota.
So, I guess it is, you could say political theater, right? But it's on the record now, right? The majority of Risky Opinion says the majority of Americans do not care, but the majority of Americans have a right to know and then decide not to care, right? But at the end of the day, this is the same thing I think about with the deep throat business of, if the Senate was not doing its job. This is a clear indication of the Senate doing its job, of democracy working. And I understand why people want to say this is political theater, but this is their job. This right here, this investigation, these trials, this is their job, to have people on. And yes, they are finding credible sources, right, who are swearing under oath, saying what they believe to be true. And that is different than your regular Supreme Court case or trial, right? This is giving the information to the American public. Now, if the majority of Americans decide, right, that this is not what they want the Senate to do. They don't want their senators or their congressfolks to investigate such claims, or if they do want, a different form of democracy, then you vote. Okay, you can't just go up into the Capitol about it. Okay, you vote on it. You vote. You don't just go up to the Capitol with your guns on this. You go and you follow the normal procedures. And this is a normal, expected, and needed procedure. That even if you think it is theater, the part of theater is bringing something to the public. And so even in that case, yes, we are trying to uncover this information and bring it to the American people because we have a right to know this information. And honestly, I'm surprised it took this long to get to these hearings, but I'm happy to be a part of these hearings, and even these last minute additions to these hearings. These are the things that we need to know, because it's clear that we would not have known any other way some of this information if it were not for these hearings and people swearing under oath, people who, work for the Trump administration, who do put, a little something on swearing under oath. Still in this day of age where everyone's a liar, there's still some people believe that swearing on the Bible makes mean something, right?
Dr. Irma, let me have you jump in. Dr. Irma,
Mouths for babes.
Dr. Irma, what are your thoughts? What are your impressions? Irma, can you hear me?
Is she muted?
I think, yeah.
You're muted, Dr. Irma.
Hey, hi, everybody.
There we go.
There went that.
I think
Yes.
Angela is, can you hear me?
Yep.
No? No, I'm not.
We
Okay, so
can hear
I'm
you.
here, I'm calling you from Mobile.
We can hear you, Irma.
We hear you.
Okay. So one of the things that comes to mind to me, I think Angela and Burnell, you keep reminding us of the rule of law, what is possible under the law. And Angela, I think you hit on an important point. Somewhere along the line, the American people under the last administration have forgotten what democracy is supposed to be about. And having worked for the federal government, what people really don't understand is that when you take an oath of office, which I've done twice, you don't swear to a person, you swear to the Constitution, and you swear to uphold that Constitution and to protect it against all enemies, both foreign and within. Clearly, Donald Trump was an enemy within. But because of how he performed his political theater, and I think we have to be very cautious about invoking terms that are used to really dismiss and denigrate. This is not political theory. This is democracy at work. These are debates and challenges, trying to protect the Constitution of the United States. And I think, people need to understand how seriously those who work in the government, even if they're working for someone they don't agree with, the extent to which they believe in that oath of office.
Thank you, Dr. Irma. Youssef, jump back in.
Well, two things strike me out. One, the attacks to dehumanize and to discredit Cassidy Hutchinson are coming from every point on the compass, which is really disappointing. I thought that she was straightforward, she was honest, she was credible, she was factual, she didn't include opinions or projections or suspicions. She talked about what she heard, what she noted, what she saw, and what she was told. And I think the fact that Giuliani and the chief of staff requested a pardon for their involvement in the entire situation surrounding January 6th is quite telling. That they, in effect, admitted that they believed that they had broken the law and wanted a presidential pardon to forgive them. So, no, I don't think this is political theater. I think this is good legislative research and public discourse. So the Justice Department has said that they are watching, that they are paying attention. I concur with Burnell that they're lining up their ducks and that they're not going to go forward until they believe that they have a winnable case that will result in an indictment and hopefully a conviction. So, the cat is out of the bag, and there are people who are very disappointed. This woman had no ulterior motives. She had nothing but the truth, and her goal in life was to become a part of the government and provide a service to the public, and I think she clearly has done that in a very commendable way.
Mel, what do you think about this notion of her being demonized now, vilified by the Republican Party, canceled in effect as one of the strategies to soften the intense scrutiny of the White House and of the Trump administration?
Well, it does not surprise me that she was immediately subject to attack. I mean, within hours of her testimony. But one of the things that's interesting is she has not been challenged on the part of her testimony that was most central, that Donald Trump knew that the people were armed at the Capitol on January 6th, that he wanted them to be able to go to the Capitol, and that he was angry. Those three facts have not been disputed by anyone. There is fact talk about the fact that she said that Trump had grabbed for the steering wheel and grabbed for the throat of one of the drivers. Oh, that never happened. But no, even the people who are saying that never happened, they haven't stood up and said, we are willing to say that it didn't happen under oath. They haven't shown the kind of courage that she exhibited. And what she has done is to say, essentially, keep your eye on the ball here. These are the central facts of what happened and what I know about January 6th. And I'm simply putting it out there. And now that she has put it out there, that means that others who did not want to come forward are going to have to come forward at some point. The president's, the White House counsel, I almost said the president's White House counsel. No, the White House counsel who works at the White House for the people of the United States, McFarlane, he's going to have to testify now. The latest reports are that he's in negotiations now with the committee, trying to find a basis for coming or grounds for coming forward that would not affect his obligations under attorney-client privilege and executive privilege. Well, I have never thought that either of those claims made much sense in this context. Neither executive privilege, which is the weaker of the two privileges, attorney-client privilege is a very, very strong privilege. In fact, I tell my students, it is the strongest privilege known in Western law. There's nothing else that even approaches it. It stands even after your client is dead. You still can't reveal information. But guess what? It doesn't apply to conspiracy. It doesn't apply to things that don't have anything to do with your giving counsel, advice to your client. And so in this circumstances, McFarlane is going to have to come forward. He was there in order to protect the interests of the United States, and he can't claim that somehow or other his duties that are owed to Donald Trump trump his duties that were owed to the United States of America.
Yourself and Angela and Brenda, let me ask your thoughts on the notion of you raised the question, Brenda, about the people being armed January 6th, the arms being brought towards the Capitol. And the only...
And also, Al, removing the metal detectors where they could take the guns.
Which is what Trump wanted. But given that, I'm surprised, and maybe I'm reading too much into it, that there wasn't more violence than there was.
I know.
That if armaments were there, if firepower was available, I am surprised that two things: the protesters weren't met with more lethal force from the authorities, but I'm also surprised that those encroachers didn't resort to more lethal force, that they pretty much confined themselves to using sticks and
flag poles with arrows on the end.
Physical things to use to fight with. So I wonder, how does that figure into the calculus of assigning severity to the process? Angela, what do you think? Dr. Irma, Youssef?
I remember 3 facts that came out within the last year. And then just of course, the utmost respect for the DC police and the Capitol officers who did protect and who were trying to mitigate the violence and de-escalate at times, to the point where even the DC police, I remember this was a major failure that folks had pointed out, the DC police had retreated, right? There was a moment when the DC police had retreated when the insurrection was coming upon the Capitol, but then, came back, with their officers. So, that is one thing of, to say maybe tactically, the tactic preparation wasn't to what it needed to be. It seemed like the folks who should have been here.
Oops.
We lost you. Youssef, go ahead.
There are 58 police departments in DC, and communication has always been a real chaos in that city. The other reality is that the weapons that they carried, the extended magazines, were clearly illegal in the District of Columbia. So they violated the law just by their simple presence, okay? And the fact that they then went to the Capitol for the insurrection. Let's remember that 3 people died in that insurrection, and I think we tend to gloss over or omit that a lot of times in looking at the severity of the total incident. The other reality is that the Capitol Police were successful in allowing the Vice President, the members of the legislature of Congress, to go into secure locations before the building was entered, because people entered the building with those weapons, with a gallows prepared outside, chanting, "Hang Mike Pence," and the president himself saying, "Those people have got the right idea. I don't have a problem with that." And again, had there been physical contact with the speaker, with other members of Congress, and it goes back to the tours that one of the Congress people led, one of the senators led a private tour the day before with people who were actually a part of the insurrection, and who were filmed, and the video showed it, and who denied it, who in fact filed a complaint against a woman from, I think she was a congressperson from New York or New Jersey, who requested that the Capitol Police investigate the tours that were given in prohibitive areas, the film footage that they shot, the photos, preparing the route for entrance and where people would be. But you can't make a lot of this stuff up, Al.
Yeah.
And you can't forget that, there were folks who knew. There were law enforcement officers who knew beforehand. They knew people would be armed, and they supported it.
And who participated in the insurrection.
Exactly.
So no trust.
So Vernell, Kamal King on several occasions has said he feared that we're headed irretrievably towards a civil war. Do any of you see that on the horizon? Is that worth us talking about, or is that simply defeatist or fear-mongering that deserves, the public by even its mention. Burnell, what do you think?
I'm a law professor, and I recognize I'm not Nostradamus. I try to stay away from making predictions that far out in advance. I don't think that today, as we sit here and have a discussion, that we're going to wake up tomorrow or any time very soon in a civil war. But if you're asking me whether I think that this country is headed in that direction and is as close as it's ever been, I would have to say, yes, we are headed in that direction, and we are as close as we've ever been. I hope we do not reach the tipping point. And I think there's plenty of time and many good reasons why we should not. And if we do, we will have flittered away one of the great enterprises in human history, democracy for 200 years.
I think that, we've had a civil war before, right? And one of the things that even after the insurrection shows us is, even though I'm rooted in an Afro-pessimistic view of society, right? I do believe that there has been a strength shown in that we did not fall, that democracy does not live in the concrete of an institution, but within the heart of people and the resilience of our leaders. And then also that, lastly, even if there is turmoil in a particular area, the upper ranks of our government is strong enough to have day-to-day operations still. And then we do have a number of public servants, so much so that, even in Hennepin County, the county of Hennepin is the largest employer, right? One of the largest employers. So there are parts of our government and our democracy that will prevail, that actually is a boon to our country and a strength to our country, because there are countries that if there is a little bit of turmoil at the top, everything falls apart, where, a dictator just puts in his cronies and you just pay off people, essentially. There is no law in different areas or policy in different policy arenas. So, that is something where I could see the preservation of our democracy and our country continuing, simply because it's so bureaucratic, the part that people hate, right? But
Burnell, jump back in, Burnell. And then Dr. Irma, from the anthropologist's point of view, how does the time look to us as you see it?
I think Angela makes an excellent point about the bureaucracy of the country. I remember during Watergate that there were many of us who thought that it was the bureaucrats who saved the nation. Basically, all of the people who, as previously was said by Dr. Irma, who took the oath and who actually believed in it. But that gives me an opportunity just to add two little footnotes. First of all, with respect to the tours prior to January 6th, that was a congressman, not a senator, and it was Congressman Barry Loudermilk, who I believe is from Georgia, a Republican congressman. The other footnote that I would put in is, let's take note of the fact that this young woman who stood up, Candace
Cassidy Hutchinson.
Yeah, she has been like a number of women in the course of this big investigation. She believes in the principles that she took the oath to uphold, and she's acting like it. And even though I share no political views in common with Liz Cheney. I must give her her due. She has walked the walk, stood up and said, this is wrong. These are not the principles that the country is founded on. These are not the principles that that so many of us have bled for. And I draw the line here.
I'm Al McFarlane. I'm going to have to call it quits there. We're a few minutes more of that conversation, but my friend Brenda is here. Brenda, thank you for listening and monitoring this with me. That was a great program, great information. It was a pleasure to listen to it and to bring it to this audience here on KFAI. As you look back, we've got about a minute or so. What themes or ideas jump out to you?
I think I go along with Vernell in the fact of Liz Cheney, and I'm so proud of Benny Thompson. They've handled this there can be no complaints. They've just had it all together. And I just pray that, here I go with the kids. I'm just praying that this all works out for the future of our children. I am really, really concerned, and I don't know if they understand the seriousness, and maybe they shouldn't at this point. But I remember we had civics, and we understood a lot of the government, and they took our civics book away. So, a lot of prayer. That's all I can say.
Well, we're out of time, and thank you, Brenda Lyle Gray. My last comment is one of the things Bernal Powell said early in the interview. He said, no nation can or should be threatened by anybody at any time. And that's kind of a rule that I think that we have to look at for the protection of our democracy. With that, I'm Al McFarlane. Thank you for being here. We'll see you next week. Turning it back over to the studio at KFAI.
Programming is supported by the Science Museum of Minnesota, encouraging listeners to help move the climate conversation beyond awareness to action. Announcing Action for Earth, a series